The lights of Zenith Prime Station blazed against the darkness of space like a jewel floating in an ocean of stars. Ships from 300 different worlds docked at its massive ports, each one carrying representatives who would decide the future of the galaxy. Inside the Grand Council chamber, beings of every imaginable shape and size gathered in their designated sections. Some breathed oxygen, others methane. Some stood on legs, others floated in gravity fields. But all of them shared one thing in common. They were afraid. Do Young Tim stood near the entrance reserved for Earth's delegation, watching the other species file in. His dark suit felt too formal, too human in this place, where creatures wore everything from crystalline armor to living moss. Beside him, Myray Lee checked her datapad for the third time in as many minutes. She was nervous, though she tried not to show it. This was humanity's first time attending the millennial gathering, and everyone knew what that meant. The Vrelian Empire was dying. For 10,000 years, they had ruled the galaxy with an iron fist wrapped in bureaucratic tradition. Their fleets had kept the peace, enforced the trade laws, and crushed anyone who stepped out of line. But now their economy was collapsing. Their military was stretched too thin across too many sectors. Rebellion had broken out in 17 territories, and the Vrelian response had been weak, almost pathetic. The old empire was falling apart, and everyone in this chamber knew it, which meant someone new would have to fill the void. Doyan felt eyes on him from every direction. The insectoid Clither watched him with their compound eyes that never blinked. The Lumarians, beings made of living crystal, pulsed with colors that their translators said meant anxiety and calculation. Even the small, furry Pelthans, usually friendly to humans, kept their distance today. Everyone was doing the same math in their heads, and the answer terrified them. Humanity had only been part of the galactic community for 200 years. 200 years. Most of these civilizations measured their histories in millennia. But in those 2 centuries, humans had gone from primitive chemical rockets to faster-than-light drives that could outpace anything in the known galaxy. They had built weapons that could crack planets open like eggs. Their industrial capacity was insane, capable of producing warships at a rate that made even the old Vrelian shipyards look slow. Worst of all, humans were aggressive. Not in the sense that they started fights, but in the sense that when someone picked a fight with them, humans didn't just win. They obliterated. The Kresh Dominion had learned that lesson the hard way 30 years ago when they tried to claim Earth's outer colonies. The war lasted 6 months. The Kresh Dominion no longer existed. Myray touched his elbow. It was time. They walked down the long aisle toward the speaker's platform. Every head, antenna, and sensory organ turned to follow them. Hinwoo Park was already there, Earth's military strategist, looking uncomfortable in his formal uniform. He gave them a small nod. Behind him, the holographic display was ready to show Earth's current military capabilities. Doyan knew what those numbers would look like to the assembled species. They would look like conquest. The council chamber's AI called the session to order in 300 languages simultaneously. The formalities took 20 minutes, which gave Doyan time to study the room. He saw calculation in some faces, fear in others, and in a few, something that looked almost like hope. Maybe they thought humans would be better rulers than the Vrelians. Maybe they were tired of the old empire's corruption and stagnation. Maybe they wanted a strong hand to keep the coming chaos at bay. Then it was Earth's turn to speak. Hyen-Woo went first, presenting the military data in his flat, professional voice. He showed them Earth's fleet deployments, their defensive networks, their shipyard production rates. He explained their faster-than-light technology, which could move ships across sectors in days rather than weeks. He demonstrated their weapon systems, carefully edited to be impressive without being too revealing. Every statistic was chosen to make one point clear. Earth could dominate the galaxy if it wanted to. The chamber was silent when he finished. Not the comfortable silence of a satisfied audience, but the tense silence of prey animals that had just realized they were in a cage with a predator god. Then Taijin Choi stood up. Chancellor. Taijin Choi was 73 years old, with gray hair and a face that had spent decades in diplomatic service. He had negotiated Earth's entry into the Galactic Council. He had personally handled first contact with 18 different species. He was known as a patient man, a careful man, someone who never made a move without thinking 3 steps ahead. But today, he looked tired. He walked to the center of the platform and looked out at the assembled civilizations. He didn't need a translator because he spoke in Galactic Standard, the common language that everyone understood. His voice was quiet, but it carried through the chamber's perfect acoustics. Earth has been asked, both formally and informally, about our intentions regarding the power transition, he said. Many of you have sent delegations to our world. You have asked whether we plan to fill the void left by the Vrelian collapse. You have asked whether we will take the throne and become the new central authority of the galaxy. The tension in the room grew so thick that Do-Yun could almost taste it. This was the moment. This was where Earth would declare its intentions, where humanity would either claim its place as the new galactic hegemon or step aside and let chaos reign. Taijin took a breath. The answer is no. For 3 full seconds, nobody moved. Nobody spoke. The translator I questioned whether it had made an error and ran the statement through its processors again. But the answer was the same . Then the chamber erupted. The Clither ambassador jumped to her feet, her mandibles clicking so fast that the translator couldn't keep up. The Lumarian high priest flashed a color that translated to complete bewilderment. Delegates from a dozen species tried to speak at once, their voices creating a wall of sound that overwhelmed the translation systems. The Council I called for order. It took 5 minutes to restore something resembling calm. The Clither ambassador was given the floor first. She approached the platform, her insect body moving with predatory grace. Is this a negotiation tactic? She demanded. Are you seeking better terms? More tribute? What do you want? Taijin shook his head. It is not a tactic. Earth will not seek galactic dominance. We will not claim the throne. The decision is final. The Lumarian high priest spoke next, his crystalline form pulsing with agitated light. Do you understand what you are saying? Without a strong central power, the galaxy will descend into chaos. Hundreds of species will go to war. Trillions will die. You have the power to prevent this, and you refuse? We understand, Taijin said. And our answer remains no. A Vrellan commander, one of the few who still attended these gatherings, stood and spoke with the authority of his dying empire. Humanity achieved what my people did in a fraction of the time. You could unite the galaxy, bring order, create something greater than what we built. Why would you turn away from that destiny? Taijin looked at the Vrelian for a long moment. Then he said something that would be quoted in history books for the next 1,000 years, because we know what we are. He didn't elaborate. He didn't explain. He simply returned to his seat beside Do-Yun and Mai-Ray, leaving the entire Galactic Council in stunned silence. The session ended without any real conclusions. Delegates returned to their ships confused, angry, or relieved, depending on their perspective. But all of them were asking the same question. Why would the strongest species in the galaxy refuse to rule it? Do-Yun stood at the observation window of Earth's diplomatic ship, watching Zenith Prime slowly rotate below them. Mai-Ray joined him, carrying 2 cups of coffee. They think we're insane, she said. Probably, Do-Yun agreed. Are we? He took the coffee and sipped it, letting the familiar taste ground him after the strangeness of the council chamber. I don't know, but I know what happens when humans get too much power. We've seen it in our own history. Rome, the Mongols, the British, the Americans, the Chinese hegemony. Every empire thinks it will be different. Every empire thinks it will be the good one. And they're all wrong? They all fell, Duyan said. And they all left scars. My ray stared out at the stars. The galaxy is going to burn without someone to hold it together. Maybe, Duyan said. Or maybe they'll figure out how to hold themselves together. Maybe that's the only way real peace happens. That's optimistic. No, Duyan said quietly. That's hope. And right now, it's all we have. Behind them, the ship's engines hummed to life, preparing for the jump back to Earth, back to a world that had just made the strangest choice in human history. They had been offered a throne, offered an empire, offered the chance to rule the stars, and they had said no. The question that nobody could answer yet was whether that choice would save the galaxy or doom it. The transport ship dropped out of faster-than-light travel above Earth, and Jiwan pressed her face against the viewing port to get her first look at the human homeworld. She had studied it in databases, seen thousands of images, but nothing prepared her for the reality. The planet was blue and green and white, covered in oceans and continents and swirling clouds. It looked peaceful, beautiful even. It was hard to believe this was the world that had produced the most dangerous species in the galaxy. Ji-1 was a clither, which meant she looked like what humans called a praying mantis, though she was much larger, and her exoskeleton was a deep purple color. She was also one of the most respected Xena historians in the galaxy, specializing in emerging civilizations. For the past 3 months, ever since the summit on Zenith Prime, she had been obsessed with one question. Why did humans refuse the throne? It made no sense. Every model of civilization development said that when a species gained enough power, they used it. They expanded, they conquered, they built empires. It was as natural as gravity. Yet humans had the power and simply walked away from it. There had to be a reason. There had to be something she was missing. The ship landed at Inchin Spaceport, a massive facility that handled both interstellar and atmospheric traffic. Ji-1 went through customs, which was surprisingly easy. The human official barely glanced at her credentials before waving her through. On most worlds, a clither historian requesting access to military and political archives would face days of bureaucracy. But Earth seemed almost eager to let her investigate. Captain Minho Shin was waiting for her in the arrival hall. He was a mid-rank officer in the Earth Defense Force, young by human standards at 32 years old. He wore a simple uniform and carried himself with the relaxed confidence of someone who didn't need to prove anything. When he saw her, he smiled and bowed slightly, which her translator informed her was a sign of respect in Korean culture. Dr. Ji-1, he said in perfect galactic standard. Welcome to Earth. I've been assigned as your liaison during your stay. Whatever you need, I'll help you get it. I need to understand why you refused, Ji-1 said bluntly. Her species didn't believe in wasting time with small talk. Minho's smile didn't fade. Then we should start with breakfast. You can't understand humans on an empty stomach. He took her to a restaurant near the spaceport that served something called kimchi jjigae, a spicy red stew that made her antennae twitch with the unfamiliar sensations. While she tried to eat it, Minho explained that he had been given full clearance to show her whatever she wanted to see and introduce her to whoever she wanted to meet. No restrictions. No censorship. Earth's government wanted her to understand their decision. Over the next week, Ji-1 conducted dozens of interviews. She spoke with politicians, scientists, military officers, teachers, and ordinary citizens. Each conversation added another piece to the puzzle, but the picture they formed was unlike anything she had expected. Her first major interview was with Admiral Subin An, commander of the Pacific Fleet, The admiral was a woman in her 50s, with sharp eyes and graying, hair pulled back in a tight bun. They met in her office at the naval headquarters in Bizen, where holographic displays showed the positions of Earth's ships scattered across a dozen star systems. "You want to know why we said no?" Subin said, pouring tea into 2 cups. "The simple answer is, we've been down that road before. We didn't like where it led." She pulled up a historical database and began showing G1 images. Battlefields from Earth's past. Trenches filled with dead soldiers. Cities reduced to rubble. Mushroom clouds rising over civilian populations. "This is the First World War," Subin said. 10 million dead. "This is the Second World War. 70 million dead. This is the nuclear exchange of 2045. 40 million dead in 6 hours." Jiwan had read about Earth's wars in academic texts, but seeing the images was different. The scale of destruction was staggering. "You fought these wars against each other," she said. "Against your own species." "Exactly," Subin replied. "We know what we're capable of. When we get scared, when we get ambitious, when we convince ourselves that our cause is righteous, we're capable of incredible destruction. And that was when we were fighting with primitive weapons on one planet. Imagine what we could do with a galactic empire and faster-than-light weapons. But you could also do incredible good," Jiwan argued. "You could bring order, protect the weak. Your power could save lives instead of taking them." Subin smiled sadly. "That's what they all say at the beginning. Every empire in our history started with good intentions, and every single one ended with mass graves." The next day, Minho took Jiwan to meet Professor Yuna Kong at Seoul National University. Yuna was a political philosopher who had written extensively about power and governance. Her office was small and cluttered with books, both physical and digital. She offered Jiwan green tea and settled into her chair with the comfortable ease of someone who spent most of her life thinking about difficult questions. "The problem with empire," Yuna explained, "is that it changes the people who run it. You might start out wanting to help, to protect, to bring order. But maintaining an empire requires force. It requires deciding that you know better than other people what's good for them. It requires crushing dissent, because you can't let the empire fall apart. Before you know it, you've become the very thing you set out to prevent." She showed Jiwan her research on Earth's historical empires. The Roman Empire, which brought roads and law and aqueducts, but also slavery and endless wars. The Mongol Empire, which connected East and West, but killed millions in the process. The British Empire, which spread technology and trade, but also colonized and exploited half the world. "Every empire tells itself a story," Yuna said. "A story about how they're different, how they're better, how their empire is justified. But the story's always a lie. Power doesn't care about your intentions. It corrupts everything it touches." "So you believe humans are uniquely corruptible?" Jiwan asked. "No," Yuna said. "I believe humans are uniquely aware of our corruptibility. We've lived through it so many times that we can't pretend it won't happen again. That's why we said no." Minho took Jiwan to the War Memorial Museum in Seoul. The building was huge, filled with exhibits that documented every major conflict in human history. But what struck Jiwan most wasn't the displays of weapons or the tactical maps or the recreations of famous battles. It was the walls. Entire walls covered with names. Millions of names. Each one a person who had died in humanity's wars. Soldiers and civilians, victors and defeated, famous and forgotten. The names went on, floor after floor, until they blurred together into a monument of loss. "We built this place so we would remember," Minho said quietly. They stood in front of a section dedicated to the victims of the nuclear exchange. His voice was soft, almost reverent. Every child on Earth visits this museum at least once during their education. We want them to understand what war really means. Not the glory, not the honor, not the excitement. The cost. They walked through exhibits showing cities before and after they were bombed. Interactive displays let visitors experience testimonies from survivors, hear their voices, see their faces. One exhibit focused entirely on children who had lost their families. Another showed the long-term effects of radiation poisoning. A third documented the mass starvations that followed the collapse of agricultural systems. These are the things we did to each other, Minho said. And we're not even that different from one another. Same species, same planet, usually similar cultures. If we could do this to each other over ideology and resources and territory, what would we do to species that are actually different from us? Species that don't think like us, don't value what we value, don't look human? Ji-won had no answer. Over the following weeks, her investigation deepened. She discovered that Earth's decision hadn't been made by a handful of leaders in a closed room. It had been a century-long global debate involving billions of people. Forums were held in every major city. Referendums were conducted. Philosophers, ethicists, historians, and ordinary citizens all participated in discussing humanity's role in the galaxy. She found recordings of these debates. A teacher in Mumbai arguing that power corrupts absolutely, and humans had too much blood on their hands to be trusted with more. A soldier in Lagos saying that they had a duty to use their strength to protect others. A farmer in Argentina insisting that Earth should focus on its own problems before trying to fix the galaxies. A student in Tokyo questioning whether they had the right to impose human values on alien civilizations. The debates were passionate, sometimes angry, often emotional. But the conclusion was remarkably consistent across cultures, nations, and demographic groups. By a margin of 73%, humanity had voted to refuse galactic dominance. Ji-won compiled all her findings into a preliminary report. She sat in her temporary apartment in Seoul, looking out at the city lights, trying to make sense of what she had learned. Her own species, the Clither, had built an empire once. It had lasted 3,000 years before collapsing into civil war that nearly destroyed their civilization. They had rebuilt, but they never talked about those days. They preferred to forget. Humans didn't forget. They couldn't. They had turned their history of violence into museums and memorials and mandatory education. They had made their shame into a shield against repeating it. Was that wisdom or trauma? Was it strength or weakness? Ji-won honestly didn't know. She sent her preliminary report to her academic institution with a note attached. She would be staying on Earth longer than planned. She needed more time to understand these strange, dangerous, principled creatures who had somehow learned to say no to power. Because the truth she was beginning to realize was this: every species in the galaxy had asked the wrong question. They had asked why humans refused the throne. But the real question was how. How had they developed the cultural immunity to the seduction of absolute power? How had they built a civilization that could turn away from empire? And most importantly, could anyone else learn to do the same? The Vrelian Empire died on a Tuesday, not all at once, not with some dramatic final battle or ceremonial surrender. It simply stopped existing. The central government in the capital sector issued one last declaration, acknowledging that it no longer had the resources or authority to maintain control. And then the communication channels went dark. 10,000 years of history ended with a bureaucratic whimper. Within days, the galaxy began tearing itself apart. Siora Nam watched the news feeds from her office in the Galactic Council headquarters. Now relocated to a neutral station called Haven's Rest, she was human. But she had left Earth 40 years ago to build a career in galactic politics. She had represented 3 different species during her time as a diplomatic advisor. She had helped negotiate peace treaties, trade agreements, and territorial settlements. She knew the galaxy better than most humans alive, and she knew it was falling apart. The reports came in waves. Fighting broke out in the Corvus sector as 3 different species laid claim to former Velian territories. The trade routes through the Pelin Nebula collapsed when pirates realized there was no central authority to stop them. Refugee stations were overwhelmed with civilians fleeing conflict zones. The death toll climbed from thousands to millions to billions, and it showed no signs of stopping. She made the call to Earth. It took 3 days for the Earth Parliament to agree to see her. They knew why she was coming, and they didn't want to have the conversation. But Ciora was persistent, and eventually they granted her an audience. She arrived at the Parliament building in Geneva, a structure of glass and steel that housed representatives from every nation on Earth. It was designed to look open and transparent, which she found bitterly ironic, given what she was about to ask them to do. Prime Minister Dongmin Lei met her in one of the smaller conference rooms. He was in his 60s, with a face that looked like it had forgotten how to smile. The weight of leadership had carved deep lines around his eyes and mouth. He offered her tea, which she declined. This wasn't a social visit. "You're here to ask us to intervene," Dongmin said. "It wasn't a question." "I'm here to beg you to intervene," Ciora replied. "Do you have any idea what's happening out there? 17 sectors are in active warfare. The refugee crisis has displaced 4 trillion beings. Entire species are facing extinction because their homeworlds are in contested territory, and nobody will defend them. We're aware of the situation. Are you? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like Earth is hiding behind its principles while the galaxy burns." Dongmin's expression didn't change, but she saw something flicker in his eyes. Anger, maybe, or pain. "We made our choice. We won't become an empire." "I'm not asking you to become an empire," Ciora said, though they both knew it was exactly what she was asking. "I'm asking you to stop the bleeding. Send your fleets to protect the refugee corridors. Patrol the major trade routes. Use your diplomatic corps to mediate the conflicts. You have the power to save lives, and you're choosing not to. Because the moment we send our fleets, the moment we start deciding which conflicts are worth our intervention, we become exactly what we swore we wouldn't be. We become the arbiters, the judges, the rulers." Ciora leaned forward. "Better you than chaos. Better you than watching billions die because nobody was strong enough to stop it." The Parliament session that followed was one of the most intense in Earth's modern history. Representatives from every nation crammed into the assembly hall to debate the question that Ciora had forced them to confront. Should Earth intervene? Governor Hejin Park of the Asian Coalition spoke first. She was a passionate advocate for humanitarian action, and her speech was powerful. She showed images from the refugee stations. Children starving. Families huddled in corridors without heat or clean water. Entire communities watching their homeworlds burn from the safety of orbital platforms. "How can we claim moral superiority," Hejin demanded, "when we sit here in comfort while others suffer? We have the ships. We have the weapons. We have the resources. Every day we do nothing. Thousands die. Their blood is on our hands as surely as if we killed them ourselves." The chamber erupted in applause from her supporters. But Senator Kungmi Chun rose to respond, and the mood shifted. Kungmi was older, a veteran of the First Contact Wars who had seen combat against the Kresh Dominion. She spoke quietly, but everyone listened. "Governor Park is right that we have power. What she's wrong about is thinking we can use that power without consequences. The moment we deploy our fleets to protect refugees, we have to decide which refugees matter. Do we protect the Clither, but not the Velonians? Do we patrol this trade route but not that one? Every choice we make becomes a statement about who deserves our protection and who doesn't. So we protect everyone, someone shouted from the back. With what? Kyungmi shot back. We're one species, one world. The galaxy is vast beyond comprehension. We can't be everywhere. We can't save everyone. So we'll have to choose. And the moment we start choosing, we become kingmakers. We become the authority that decides which species survive and which ones don't. That's not peacekeeping. That's empire. The debate raged for hours. Representatives argued about duty, responsibility, and the nature of power. Some cited Earth's history of intervention and how it always ended badly. Others argued that this was different, that the galaxy needed them in a way that humanity had never been needed before. Outside the Parliament building, protests erupted. On one side, thousands gathered carrying signs demanding action. They played recordings of alien children crying in refugee camps. They shared testimonies from species facing extinction. A young activist named Daeon Choi, granddaughter of the former Chancellor Taijin, led rallies across the world, arguing that strength without compassion was worthless. On the other side, counter-protesters gathered with their own message. Many were veterans of Earth's wars, led by a soldier named Ji-hoon Bae, who had lost both legs fighting the Kresh. They carried signs reminding people of the atrocities humans had committed when they thought they were doing good. Every empire thinks it's saving the world, their banners read. We know better. The Security Council, Earth's primary military command structure, deadlocked. Half the members wanted to prepare for intervention. Half wanted to maintain neutrality. Defense Secretary Young Jae-han quietly ordered contingency plans drawn up for fleet deployment, hoping he would never have to use them. Director Sora Kim of Earth Intelligence leaked documents showing that human corporations were already exploiting the chaos, selling weapons and ships to anyone who could pay, making profit off the galaxy's suffering. The moral high ground that Earth had claimed was looking less solid by the day. Then came the message that changed everything. The Clither homeworld, Kurthan Prime, home to 18 billion souls, was under attack. A rogue Velian warlord named Commander Tesk had gathered a fleet of mercenaries and pirates and launched an assault. His motivation was simple. He wanted the Clithers' advanced manufacturing facilities and their strategic position near the galactic core. He didn't care about the billions of civilians in his way. The Clither government sent a desperate plea to anyone who would listen. Their own defense fleet was small, designed for border patrol rather than full-scale warfare. They had days at best before Tesk's forces broke through their orbital defenses and began bombardment. Earth's Third Fleet was the only military force close enough to arrive in time. Prime Minister Dong-min sat in the Situation Room beneath the Parliament building, surrounded by his military advisors and cabinet members. The holographic display showed the Clither system in real time, updated every few seconds by faster-than-light communication relays. The red markers representing Tesk's fleet were closing on the blue markers of Kurthan Prime's defenses. Computer projections showed the likely outcome. Without intervention, the Clither had a 4% chance of survival. Third Fleet can reach them in 18 hours, Admiral Subin said. But I need authorization now. Every minute we delay means more Clither die. If we intervene, Senator Kyungmi said, we cross a line we can't uncross. We become the galaxy's protector. Every species with a conflict will expect us to solve it. And if we don't intervene, Governor Hedgen countered, 18 billion beings die, and the galaxy learns that Earth's principles are worth more to us than alien lives. Is that the message we want to send? Dong-min looked at each face around the table. Some showed conviction, others doubt. All of them looked exhausted. They had been wrestling with this question for months. Now they had hours to decide. "There's another option," said Ambassador Ciora, who had been granted a seat at the table despite not being part of the government. "Send the fleet, but don't engage. Position yourselves between Tesk and Curthin Prime. Make it clear that he'll have to go through Earth to reach the Clither. Use your reputation, your power. Make him back down without firing a shot. And if he doesn't back down?" Someone asked. "Then you'll have your answer," Ciora said. "You'll know if Earth's principles are worth 18 billion lives." The vote was called. It was closer than anyone wanted to admit. But in the end, the authorization passed by a margin of 3 votes. Admiral Subin sent the order. Earth's Third Fleet altered course toward the Clither homeworld. Admiral Yemen O, commanding the fleet, received his instructions with a mixture of relief and dread. He had been watching the situation develop, watching the death toll climb, wanting to help but bound by Earth's policy of non-intervention. Now that policy had a crack in it. And everyone knew that cracks could widen. As the fleet prepared to jump, Dongmin stood at the window of his office, looking out at the lights of Geneva. Somewhere in the city, protesters were celebrating because Earth was finally taking action. Somewhere else, other protesters were mourning because Earth had just taken its first step toward empire. He wondered which group was right. He suspected, with a weight that made his chest hurt, that they both were Earth's Third Fleet, dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Clither, home system with the kind of precision that only human navigation computers could achieve. 47 ships materialized in perfect formation, their hulls dark against the stars, their weapon systems cold but ready. Admiral Yemen O stood on the bridge of the flagship Horizon, watching the tactical display update with enemy positions. "Commander, Tesk's fleet was larger than intelligence had suggested. 63 ships of various classes, many of them repurposed Vrelian military vessels that the warlord had claimed during the Empire's collapse. They were arranged in a blockade formation around Curthin Prime, systematically destroying the Clither orbital defense platforms. The planet's surface was still intact, but projections showed that would change within 12 hours if the defense grid fell completely. Captain Hanno Lim, commanding the Horizon's tactical section, pulled up a communications channel. "Sir, we have firing solutions on the enemy fleet. We could disable their command ships before they even know we're here." Yemen shook his head. "Stand down weapons. Broadcast our presence on all channels. I want Tesk to know we're here." The message went out in Galactic Standard, powerful enough to reach every ship in the system. "This is Admiral Yemeno of Earth's Third Fleet to all vessels. We are assuming a defensive position around Curthin Prime. Any hostile action against the Clither will be considered an act of war against Earth. You are ordered to withdraw immediately." For a moment, nothing happened. Then Tesk's flagship, a massive dreadnought called the Iron Talon, adjusted its position. A communication channel opened, and a face appeared on the Horizon's main display. Commander Eziel Kwan was human, which made the situation infinitely more complicated. She had been born on Earth 45 years ago, served in the Earth Defense Force for a decade, then deserted to seek fortune and glory among the stars. She had eventually risen to lead one of the most feared mercenary groups in the galaxy. Now she had pledged her fleet to Tesk's cause in exchange for a cut of the Clither resources they planned to plunder. "Admiral," Eziel said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes, "Earth finally decided to join the game. I was wondering how long you'd hide behind your noble principles while the galaxy burned." "This isn't a game," Yemen replied. "Withdraw your forces, and this ends peacefully." Eziel laughed. "You won't fire. Everyone knows Earth's policy. You don't start wars. You don't intervene in alien conflicts. You're here to look tough and hope we back down. But I know you, Yemen. I served under you for 2 years before I left. You're a good officer, which means you follow orders. And your orders are to avoid conflict at all costs." She was right, and they both knew it. Yemen's instructions were clear. Position the fleet defensively. Negotiate. De-escalate. Do not engage unless fired upon. Earth's government was terrified of what would happen if they actually used military force. The act of sending the fleet at all had nearly torn the Parliament apart. "I'm giving you one chance," Yemen said. "Stand down. Or what? You'll write a strongly worded complaint to the Galactic Council that doesn't exist anymore?" Isiel's expression hardened. "The old galaxy is dead, Admiral. The age of diplomacy and committees is over. This is the age of strength. You either use your power or someone else uses it against you. Earth chose to be weak. That's not my problem." The channel closed. Tesk's fleet began moving into assault formation, preparing to finish off the last Clither orbital platforms. On Curthin Prime, 18 billion beings watched their skies and waited to see if Earth would actually defend them, or if humanity's promises were as empty as Isiel claimed. Yemen made a decision that wasn't in his orders. Move us between their fleet and the planet. Maximum sublight speed. Every ship, defensive formation Omega. The Third Fleet surged forward, positioning themselves directly in the path of Tesk's advance. They didn't power up weapons. They didn't lock targeting systems. They simply placed their ships between the attackers and their target. The message was clear. If you want to reach Curthin Prime, you have to go through us. Isiel's voice came back over the channel, angry now. "You're bluffing. You won't fire first. That's not who Earth is." "You're right," Yemen said. "We won't fire first. But we also won't move. Your choice, Commander." The standoff began. For 47 hours, the two fleets faced each other across a few thousand kilometers of space. Tesk's forces couldn't advance without literally colliding with Earth's ships. They tried to go around, but the Third Fleet adjusted position every time, maintaining the barrier. Yemen barely slept, spending his time on the bridge coordinating with his captains and maintaining constant communication with both Tesk's fleet and the Clither government. Hannah Lim ran the diplomatic front. She had always been better at talking than fighting, which made her perfect for this situation. She opened channels with the other species that made up Tesk's fleet. Many of them were mercenaries, hired guns who fought for credits rather than conviction. Hannah spoke to them about Earth's reputation, about what would happen if they actually attacked a human fleet, about whether the money was worth dying for. She contacted 3 dozen neutral species who had ships in nearby systems and convinced them to send observers. If fighting broke out, the whole galaxy would be watching. She reached out to species that had trade relationships with the Clither and reminded them what would be lost if Curthin Prime fell. Slowly, carefully, she built a coalition of witnesses and potential allies. On the 3rd day, the first cracks appeared in Tesk's resolve. 6 mercenary ships broke formation and jumped away, their captains deciding that the risk wasn't worth the reward. Then 4 more. Isiel's voice came over the command channel, angry and desperate, but Hannah cut through her transmission with a direct appeal to the remaining mercenaries. "You're fighting for a paycheck," she said. "We're fighting for 18 billion lives. Ask yourself which side you want to be on when this story gets told." More ships began to leave. The blockade fell apart ship by ship as mercenaries abandoned a cause that was looking less profitable by the hour. Within 6 hours, Tesk had lost half his fleet. The remaining ships were mostly true believers and pirates with nowhere else to go. Then the reinforcements arrived. 3 small fleets jumped into the system, bearing the colors of the Pelthan Federation, the Lumarian Collective, and the Democratic Union of Free Worlds. They weren't large forces, maybe 20 ships combined, but they positioned themselves alongside Earth's fleet in the defensive line. The message was clear. The Third Fleet wasn't alone anymore. Yemen received a communication from the Pelthan Admiral, a grizzled veteran named Corthan. "We heard Earth was making a stand. Figured you could use some company." "You're risking war for the Clither?" Yemen asked. "We're risking war because someone needs to," Corthan replied. "Earth showed us it was possible to say no to easy power. Maybe you can show us how to say yes to hard duty." With the combined fleet between him and Curthan Prime, with his mercenaries abandoning him, with the entire galaxy watching through the sensor feeds of neutral observers, Commander Tusk finally had to face reality. He couldn't win this fight without massive casualties, and even if he won, Earth would never forget. Neither would the dozens of other species who were now watching and judging. Is a UL made one last transmission to Yemen. "You won this round, but you've proven my point. You can't stay neutral anymore. The moment you moved your ships into position, you became players in the great game. Welcome to empire building, Admiral. Hope it's everything you dreamed." Tusk's fleet jumped away. The crisis was over. Not a single shot had been fired. The celebration on Curthan Prime lasted for days. The Clither government declared Earth their eternal allies and offered formal security agreements. Similar offers came from a dozen other species who had been watching the standoff. The message was spreading across the galaxy. Earth might not want to be an empire, but they would protect those who needed protection. Ambassador Doyan addressed a hastily convened Galactic Council session from the Horizons Communications Center. What happened here was not Earth claiming authority over the Clither. It was Earth helping the Clither defend themselves. "We did not act alone. We built a coalition. We sought peaceful resolution. And when resolution failed, we held the line without firing a shot. This is what we offer the galaxy. Not domination, partnership." It was a beautiful speech. Many species applauded it. But others, including Dr. Jiwan, who watched from her quarters on Earth, saw the deeper truth. Earth had intervened. They had used their military to influence galactic affairs. They had taken sides in a conflict. The line between helper and hegemon had already started to blur. No matter how noble their intentions, the consequences came quickly. Within weeks, delegations from 30 different species arrived on Earth requesting defense agreements. They offered tribute, resources, technology, anything Earth wanted in exchange for protection. Trade delegations followed, offering preferential deals to Earth corporations in exchange for security guarantees. Some species even requested that Earth establish military bases in their territories. Military advisors from Earth, including officers like Commander Heiji Nam and Colonel Taiyang Ru, were dispatched to train Allied forces. Earth's shipyards began producing vessels designed for export, weapon systems tailored to alien biologies. The infrastructure of empire was being built piece by piece, each step seeming reasonable and necessary. Each step taking Earth further from the refusal they had made at Zenith Prime. Director Sora Kim published a classified report that got leaked within days. It documented how Earth officials were accepting gifts from grateful alien governments, how corporations were pressuring the government to establish permanent peacekeeping forces to protect their investments, how the military was drawing up plans for long-term deployment across the galaxy. None of it was illegal. None of it was even particularly corrupt. But it was building something that looked more like an empire every day. Yemen returned to Earth a hero. The public loved him. He had saved 18 billion lives without firing a shot. But when he met privately with Prime Minister Dongmin, the celebration felt hollow. "We crossed a line," Dongmin said. "We saved a world," Yemen replied. Both things can be true. They sat in silence for a moment, both men understanding that Earth had changed. The refusal of the throne had been absolute and clear. But this new role, this position as reluctant defender and mediator, was ambiguous and dangerous. It was the kind of position that could slide into something worse without anyone quite noticing when it happened. What do we do now? Yemen asked. Dongnin had no answer. Outside his window, the lights of Geneva glowed in the darkness, beautiful and fragile, like everything humanity was trying to protect. Like everything they were terrified of becoming. 2 years after the Curthin Prime crisis, the galaxy had stopped pretending there was any authority left except Earth. The Galactic Council still met, still passed resolutions, still maintained the fiction of collective governance. But everyone knew the truth. When there was a crisis, species called Earth. When trade disputes erupted, they asked Earth to mediate. When wars threatened to spiral out of control, they waited to see what Earth would do. Prime Minister Dongmin had aged a decade in those 2 years. He looked older than his 68 years, the stress of trying to hold an impossible line visible in every wrinkle and gray hair. His office was filled with requests, petitions, and pleas. Every day brought new crises that demanded Earth's attention. Every day pulled them further from the simple refusal they had made at Zenith Prime. The petition arrived on a Tuesday morning. It was signed by 212 species, representing over 90% of the galactic population. The language was formal and respectful, but the message was clear. They were begging Earth to accept a formal mandate, not as conquerors, not as rulers, but as stewards. They wanted Earth to officially become the galactic authority, the central power that could coordinate defense, maintain order, and prevent the chaos from consuming everything. They were offering the throne without calling it a throne. Dongmin read the petition 3 times, then called an emergency session of Parliament. Representatives flew in from every nation on Earth. The debate would determine not just humanity's future, but the fate of the galaxy. The long debate, as historians would call it, lasted 3 months. Every argument was raised, examined, torn apart, and reassembled. The sessions were broadcast live across Earth and transmitted to every species that wanted to watch. Billions of humans and trillions of aliens watched the discussion that would define an era. Admiral Subin spoke early in the debate, her voice carrying the weight of someone who had spent 2 years watching Earth's role expand. We're already performing the functions of an empire. We coordinate the defense of 40 sectors. Our diplomats mediate conflicts on a daily basis. Our trade agreements effectively govern galactic commerce. We might as well make it official. At least then we could do it efficiently, with clear authority and proper oversight. She showed logistics data, proving that Earth's informal authority was creating confusion and inefficiency. Species didn't know when Earth would intervene or when they'd refuse. There were no clear guidelines, no established procedures. People were dying in the gaps between Earth's principles and the reality of galactic need. Senator Kyung-mi responded with her own data. She had been tracking Earth personnel deployed across the galaxy, and what she found was disturbing. We have military advisors on 73 worlds. Do you know what they're starting to call the species they're helping? Clients, not allies. Not partners, clients. Our traders are exploiting information asymmetries to dominate local markets. Our diplomats are making decisions about alien governments without consulting those governments. The empire is already forming. We just haven't declared it yet. Professor Yuna Kong presented research on the psychology of power. She showed how Earth officials were already beginning to think differently about their role. Interviews with returning diplomats revealed subtle shifts in language and attitude. They talked about alien species as dependent rather than allied. They made decisions for their own good without seeking input. The corruption wasn't financial. It was deeper, more insidious. It was the corruption of believing they knew best. The debate raged through every major issue. Security versus sovereignty. Order versus freedom. Responsibility versus restraint. Some argued that Earth's reluctance was causing more suffering than their intervention would. Others argued that the moment Earth accepted formal authority, they would lose the very thing that made them different from every other empire in history. Then Ambassador Ciora requested time to speak. She stood before the assembly. This woman, who had spent 4 decades in galactic politics, who had seen the best and worst of multiple civilizations, who had been one of the strongest voices pushing Earth to take a more active role. Her testimony was devastating. "I was wrong," she said simply. "For 2 years, I've been coordinating Earth's relief efforts across the galaxy. I've worked with hundreds of our people who are out there trying to help. And I've watched them change. Good people. Dedicated people. People who genuinely want to make things better. But power changes you in ways you don't notice." She described incidents that had been kept quiet. Earth administrators overruling local governments because they thought their way was better. Military advisors treating alien officers as subordinates rather than equals. Diplomats negotiating deals that benefited Earth first and their supposed allies second. None of it was dramatic. None of it was evil. But it was the slow drift toward empire that everyone had feared. "I've seen our people start calling aliens subjects," Ciora said, her voice breaking. "I've heard them joke about primitive species needing guidance. I've watched them make decisions about alien worlds without consulting anyone from those worlds. And when I confront them, they say the same thing every empire has said. We're trying to help. We know better. It's for their own good." The chamber was silent when she finished. Everyone understood what she was describing. It wasn't a warning about what might happen. It was a report about what was already happening. The vote was scheduled for the end of the 3-month debate. But before it could happen, Dongmin requested one final session. He had a proposal that nobody expected. "Earth will not accept the mandate," he announced. "But we also recognize that our current approach is unsustainable and potentially dangerous. Therefore, we are proposing something different, something that has never been tried on a galactic scale." He unveiled the plan that his team had been developing in secret for months. Instead of one central authority, the galaxy would form a true federation. Each species would maintain complete sovereignty over their own worlds and affairs. But they would join a collective defense and trade alliance with clear rules and procedures. Decisions would be made by majority vote of member species, with no single species having veto power. Not even Earth. "We will contribute to this federation," Dongmin said. "We will provide ships, resources, and expertise. But we will not lead it. We will be one voice among many, one vote among hundreds. The galaxy will learn to govern itself, or it will fail. But it will not fail because